Good afternoon, good evening. I am Bob McConnell, co-founder of the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation and Director of External Relations for the Foundation's Friend of Ukraine Network. The panel we're going to have now, the topic is the Crimean platform. Where does it stand? The platform is a diplomatic initiative of Ukraine designed to be an international coordinating mechanism to restore Russia-Ukraine relations by means of reversing the 2014 annexation of Crimea and the rest of Russia's aggressions. The platform was not a one-time event, but is an ongoing effort, and groups of participants are involved. In our panel, we are going to learn a little bit about what's happening since the August formal meeting of the platform, and perhaps how the platform is or can play a role in the current Russia-provoked crisis. Our panel today include Petro Beshta, who is the political director at Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Petro has over 20 years of experience in diplomacy, developing partnerships, and designing and planning strategies. Also with us, and I'm apologizing in advance for the second name, Andrei Zarodanyuk, studied law and also graduated from Warwick University in Oxford. In private life, Andrei was CEO of Discovery Drilling Equipment. But starting in 2015, Andrei became deeply involved in the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and became an advisor to President Zelensky when the president was elected. In July of 2019, the president appointed Andrei as a member of the supervisory board of Ukroprom, the defense industry giant. And then in August of 2019, he was appointed Minister of Defense and held that position until March of 2020. Currently, and importantly, Andrei is now the chairman of the Center for Defense Strategies in Kiev. And I note that the center has on its board several members of our Friends of Ukraine network, General Wes Clark and Ambassador Bill Taylor. Also on our panel, joining us is Alina Frolova, who is the deputy chairman of the Center for Defense Strategies and former Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine. So with those introductions, I turn to Petro and ask a little bit if he will give us an update on the platform and tell us if the platform is or can play a role in the current situation. Petro?
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation for organizing this event and thank all participants for joining us online. In fact, our meeting takes place in the background of truly historic developments. Less than a month ago, Minister Kuleba and State Secretary Blinken met in Washington and signed the new Ukraine-US Charter on Strategic Partnership. The Charter outlined a number of areas of our intensified dialogue, from security to counter Russian aggression, from democracy and the rule of law to economic transformation and energy security. It is our priority now to implement the Charter. And I would like to thank the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation for its tireless efforts to strengthen the U.S.-Ukraine bilateral dialogue and people-to-people ties. This debate is focused on the Crimea platform, and let me briefly talk about the key elements of this recent Ukrainian initiative. The Crimea platform is a new coordination and consultation instrument initiated by President Zelensky to provide a long-term vision to the process of Crimea's deoccupation. It's about strategy, consolidation, and synergy. The platform has to provide strategic vision of the occupation, consolidate international efforts around it, and ensure synergy at three levels: at intergovernmental, interparliamentary, and expert. It was officially launched at the August 23rd inaugural summit held in Kiev with the participation of 46 delegations of foreign states and international organizations. In addition to the interstate level, we actively develop the Crimea platform's parliamentary dimension. As you may know, the Crimea platform support groups have already been established in parliaments of Latvia, Lithuania, and NATO Parliamentary Assembly. We hope to intensify the Rada Congress dialogue to ensure Crimea stays in focus of American legislatures. The expert diplomacy component is of equal importance. As of today, more than 200 experts from 33 countries expressed their readiness to join the International Crimea Platform Expert Network. To ensure the Crimea Platform's success as a long-term, sustainable and robust international instrument, its activities are focused around 5 tracks. The first track is the consolidation of the non-recognition policy. Russia's expectation that Ukraine and the world will eventually take this illegal attempted annexation of Crimea for granted have been proved unfounded. This is a temporary phenomenon, not an accomplished fact, as Russia wanted to put. The second track pertains to strengthening and raising awareness of the restrictive measures, including sanctions. Crimea packages of sanctions provided valuable leverages, yet they are not strong enough to make Russia change its behavior. International sanctions policy needs upgrading, and stronger enforcement mechanisms should be put in place. The third track is about protection of human rights in Crimea and countering international humanitarian law violations. Russia and its occupation administration continue committing gross human rights violations. The situation remains really dire as more than 100 citizens of Ukraine remain behind bars on the politically motivated charges, most of them Crimean Tatars. The most recent case of political persecution was detention of first deputy chairman of Mejlis Nariman Jalilov immediately after the summit of Crimea platform. So fourth, we will address the problem of negative economic and environmental consequences of the Russian aggression. And finally, the fifth element is addressing the problem of Crimea militarization. We will focus on negative implications of the rapid militarization of Crimea for the regional and transatlantic security. Compared to the pre-occupation period, Russia has almost tripled the number of its military personnel in the Crimea Peninsula from 12,000 to around 33,000. Moreover, until 2025, their number will grow up to 40,000, 45,000. In addition, nearly 12,000 servicemen of the Russian National Guard and the FSB border service are also deployed in Peninsula. However, militarization of Crimea has negative implications for much broader context. An emerging fault line runs directly from the Arctic through the Baltic to the Black Sea region and Mediterranean. The area where democratic values and international rules-based order are being challenged by Russia. For 8 years of Russia's occupation of the Crimea Peninsula and surrounding waters have been converted from a splendid tourist location into a Russian military outpost. Crimea Bastion is aimed at expanding Russia's dominance within the wider Black Sea region in the Eastern Europe, the Balkans, the Mediterranean, and the Middle East, and power projection in distant hotspots like Syria and Libya. Along with the large-scale militarization of Crimea, the Russian Federation increases capacities to transfer warships between the Caspian Sea, the Sea of Azov, and the Black Sea. The naval component of the Russian forces includes ships and attack submarine equipped with caliber cruise missiles that could reach La Manche, North Africa, and the Western Mediterranean. We are particularly concerned that Russia prepares Crimean military infrastructure for development of nuclear weapons. Currently, 38 units of military equipment deployed in Crimea can potentially be used as carriers of nuclear weapons. Nuclearization of Crimea poses a serious threat to global security. Moreover, by manipulating the norms of international law, Russia imposes extensive and long-term restrictions on the freedom of navigation, blocks huge maritime areas under the pretext of military exercises, and undermines transportation routes. It is an important instrument of Russian hybrid warfare aimed at economic suffocation of Ukraine. It causes significant damage to normal economic activity in the region and converts this area into the Great Logistic Zone. In this clash, Ukraine became a frontline state threatened from east, south, and due to the developments in Belarus from north. Notwithstanding all these challenges, Ukraine, supported by partners, has demonstrated its resilience. Ukraine is actively working on its national military track, enhancing defense capabilities and naval potential, reforming its armed forces, and improving compatibility with allied forces. Ukraine is eager to become an active architecture of a new security ecosystem in the region. It is a member of the Lublin Triangle with Poland and Lithuania, the Quadriga format with Turkey, the associated trio of Georgia and Moldova, and founder of the International Crimea Platform. All of them confirmed to our determination to build up the belt of security and prosperity in the Baltic and wider Black Sea region, to lay the solid foundation for peaceful return of the occupied territory of Crimea and Donbas and other territories belonging to protracted conflict in the area. The unanimous voice of the 46 partner countries and key regional institutions in support of the Crimea platform demonstrated that we share the same vision. Within the framework of the Crimea platform security track, MFA and Ukraine's Defense Ministry, in partnership with the Center for Security Strategies, plan to organize a ministerial level annual security conference in the beginning of the next year. We will focus on security in the wider Black Sea region and its implications for the global level, as well as on use of economic tools, disinformation, and lawfare as hybrid instruments of war. We plan to discuss militarization of Crimea and our joint and consistent response to it, devising modalities of multilateral cooperation. Thank you, and I welcome your questions and comments.
Well, thank you, Petro. I mean, you set it out there. It's quite an undertaking. It has a lot of responsibility. My understanding is there are certain groups, you know, legislative, diplomatic, and NGO doing follow-ups. How is that structured and how is that going? I mean, why don't I ask you first and then I'll ask Andrei for a comment.
Well, from the beginning, this initiative was designed to be a multi-layered activity. It's intergovernmental level, it's expert level, and it's interparliamentary level. And we try to utilize all possible resources that we have at our disposal, using think tanks and experts to provide some analytical research to some particular issues and to provide recommendation to governments where they can discuss these recommendations and transform them into political actions. To that point, we have established a fund of expert network of Crimea platform that could finance all these undertakings of analytical researches and expert diplomacy all over the world to raise the issues that form the core of Crimea platform. And we want also to integrate the Crimea platform activities in the global environment, because a lot of different processes that are taking place in the occupied Crimea, they have some interconnections with the processes in the Arctic region, in the Pacific. So we believe that these expert network activities could have truly global nature.
Thank you. And Andrei, your Center for Defense Strategies is part of that expert group, I believe. Yes. Can you comment on what's going on with that group?
Okay, so first of all, the Crimean Platform Summit, it was a very substantial event, which was widely broadcasted and publicized, and it had a great attendance from many countries and so on. At the same time, the question is, what are we talking about when we talk about Crimean platform? So what are the real challenges? The real challenge, number one, is that it's a completely unprecedented case, and I mean in the recent history, and Russia is working in all multi-dimensional sort of in different dimensions in order to make the world to consider that this is a turned page, this is a story, a done deal, basically, and the world have to live with this, that Crimea is now Russian, and that's it, and there's nothing can be done. We think it's a huge violation of many international laws imaginable, and at the same time presents a massive precedent for global order and generally international law as a because if this precedent is continues and it's not addressed, and Russia can continue as it is and eventually get back business to as usual, that will first of all open a door to many other violations of international law by Russia and by other countries. And essentially, it may be what will just destroy the international law and destroy the world as we know it, because the law is only good as to the extent it can be enforced. And if we cannot find a way to enforce international law in respect of Crimea, that's pretty much shows that the law doesn't work, and then we are in a lawless state, which consequently will bring lots of more and more cases in the future, and that would be it. So we need jointly to find the solution, both for Ukraine as the country which temporarily lost access to a huge part and extremely important part of its territory, and culturally, historically, from a value perspective, but more importantly, it's not even an annexation. It's occupation of the large part of the sovereign state. So that's one thing, but also as a precedent for the future for the other countries. Now, and I just said that most of the aspects of that plan are not researched. So there's lots of sort of blue ocean, research which we need to do. It basically lots of precedents in international law and cannot be applied to Crimea, or they're talking about something else. Lots of military and scenario building and modeling has to be done first time. Also, when we're talking about Crimea, we're not talking about just about the land of Crimea. We're talking about also the Black Sea part which surrounds Crimea and the Sea of Azov. In the Sea of Azov, we have an international treaty of 2003, which pronounces the Sea of Azov as an internal waters of the two countries, which Russia is now using, and quite legally they can come up with their military forces almost up to the shores of Ukraine, which creates a whole different level of security risks. Overall, seas like a part of the sea, Black Sea and Azov Sea, which Ukraine temporarily not controlling, is bigger than Crimea and Donbass put together, twice bigger than Donbass and Crimea. So it's 100,000 square kilometers of water, and we're talking about important trade routes. We're talking about a huge deposits of energy, of hydrocarbons, and lots of other consequences. So as we could see, Russia is extremely aggressive about that. We're also talking about the dimensions such as, for example, the gas rigs, which were expropriated together with the other Crimean assets. Those are right in the middle of the northern part of the Black Sea, and they're turned into military installations. So there are military groups there, and there is like measurement equipment there, and there is special operation forces there, and so on and so on. So there's a huge amount of various dimensions and various aspects which Crimean occupation brings. We are looking at the security side. So we're looking at this. We're looking at the Black Sea. We're looking at the Crimean land. We're looking at the security and both conventional military security and hybrid warfare. Because again, as you know, we are in Crimea. We have lots of, shall I say, developments or innovations in the hybrid warfare, which pretty much the world haven't seen before. So all this, in order to understand what the strategy should be, what the roadmap for the deoccupation should be, and how to address those issues, we need to look at them, research them, study our options, and understand how the world can make Russian occupation of Crimea extremely costly, expensive, eventually intolerable, and eventually somehow after some period of time start the process of returning it back. We do not think that we should be we should be compromising on this ever in the future, regardless of what Putin's plans are and ambitions are, and how he's portraying that. We need to understand it may be a very long process, but at the same time we need to be firm, and we need to be long. Like our strategy should be long-termist one. In order to get there, we need to build a pyramid of knowledge. We need to build a base of knowledge about certain aspects, how to address them. For example, how we should address the lawsuits, how we should address the sanctions, how we should address the sanctions about the Black Sea. What should be our strategy of Black Sea, taking into account the occupation? What should be our strategy about militarizing the whole Crimea, turning it into a base? A separate dimension is the nuclear threat, because we do believe that Russia either is getting ready and either already nuclear warheads to Crimea, or is ready to do that at any point of time. And there is a secondary proof to that, which we can discuss, which obviously creates a whole different dimension of the legal status of Crimea, because Russia says it can do whatever it likes because it's its territory. What the rest of the world should say is that if nuclear warheads are brought in Crimea, that's a huge violation of non-proliferation agreements, and so on. Then we're talking about all hybrid things. We're talking about the cultural part of the security, because the civil society is getting militarized. There's a huge amount of expropriations of the properties there. Generally, the value of Crimea is still a question. What is the monetary value of this? And again, we need to understand that not in order to sort of bill Russia for that, for sort of taking Crimea into ownership, but there are various other losses which are connected to the loss of the access to the property and to the assets, not necessarily causing you recognition of that loss. So we still do not recognize Crimea, but we still cannot access those assets. And we're talking about hundreds of billions probably of the value of the assets. We're talking about roads, lands, infrastructure, mobile communications, banking system, internet system, and all other things which were related to Ukraine and which Ukraine have lost. We do need to make we do need to make that cost built to Russia, that they need to feel the actual value, monetary value of their decision. Because if somebody, I don't know, if private person or company does something like that on a much smaller scale, there is a whole network of, and there's a whole legal framework of how the law protects the owners and protects and punishes the party which have breached the law. There is no such thing in international law which would work. So we need to create some precedents in this case, and so on and so on. So there's lots of different dimensions of Crimea which we need to study in order to address. One important. Before I pass the floor to Alina, because we're working, Alina will describe, hopefully, the certain specific studies which we did over the last year and which we're still doing. Another important dimension, just for us to understand, is the energy side. So first of all, Crimea itself has a substantial energy potential, both conventional, talking about hydrocarbons, and renewable. From the conventional perspective, we all understand how Russia weaponizes its presence and its position in the markets of, let's say, natural gas. Now imagine what we had, that just before the war, companies like Shell and Exxon were committed billions of dollars to development of the gas reserves in the Black Sea, which is attached to Crimea. Access to which is now lost. Again, as we always say, temporarily, but nevertheless, at the moment, there's no access. Obviously, it completely, with the start of the war, and annexation, it's completely destroyed any investment potential of that region, especially since they continued their war efforts to Donbass, where Shell also committed to $6 billion of the investments back in 2013 and 14. And then there were some other large companies. So we were looking at, and this is documented, and this still can be Googled because there were press releases about that. We're looking at the tens of billions, or probably like up to, I don't know, 15 or even more billions of preliminary committed funds, or at least expected to be committed funds of the international oil field companies to develop hydrocarbons in Ukraine. That would certainly make Ukraine energy independent, but also it would most likely create problems for the monopoly position of Russia in the energy market. Now suddenly we see this all gone, and Russia is producing gas by itself in the Black Sea. So there was a very substantial like gas dimension specifically in Crimean case. Interestingly, anyone who is related to oil field production or development and so on, they know that Chernomornaftogaz, which was a national-owned oil field company in Black Sea, is operated by Gazprom. Because there's still people there who are used to work for Ukrainian national company. Now they just consider themselves working for Russian national company. But Gazprom is not sanctioned for that, because technically there is no connection, because Gazprom is not officially managing those assets. It belongs to Russian state, but at the same time it doesn't formally operate it. So this shadow management of the expropriated assets is a huge part of the studies, because through that they operate the infrastructure which is supposed to be sanctioned. So same thing happens when we did the research on that. Same thing happened with the defense companies which are based in Crimea. They're avoiding sanctions through working through Russian non-sanctioned entities. By kind of looking at this network of sort of creative solutions which Russians are doing in order to support economically Crimea and use its potential, and at the same time not sanction the other. By looking at this, we can uncover lots of things, and including how to put a substantial pressure on Russia for that. Anyway, so there's a lot of deep research happens, and I'll pass the floor to Alina, and then would be happy to continue later. So,
Alina?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for inviting, and glad to see everyone. Just would like to add to what Andrew was saying, that talking about these researchers, actually the Crimean platform dimensions, which Petro mentioned, there are 3 dimensions. So this is like a governmental, expert, and parliamentary. The expert community is specifically focused on these researches and studies and providing advices to the government. Why? Because we perfectly, as Andrew described, there are like many aspects of everything what's going on around Crimea and the Black Sea. And obviously government doesn't have enough resources to investigate all these cases and to collect all the information and to monitor it. And but the expert community has, because we have like a quite big network, and for example, security track, which is dealing with only security issues, includes around 40 experts and plus 10 organizations, and this is only Ukrainian. We just started up building the international network of experts for support, and this is mainly the focus. And we do a lot of researches, and our center just like completed already 11 researches dedicated to different aspects of Crimean occupation or threats or possible threats and scenarios of the development of the further trends, let's say so, from Russian Federation. And we investigated with cultural aspects and influence on cultural heritage, which is absolutely underestimated by many players. We investigated some military aspects, like creating a Crimean bastion, so how the militarization influence on the security of wider security, not only Black Sea, but Mediterranean. We do investigate how the absence of NATO in enough like a capacity in this region influenced the Russian behavior. and how the NATO should change and leading countries should change their strategy to keep and to let's say to deter Russia not only in the Black Sea, but also the Baltics, also the Mediterranean, and also how does it influence on the global freedom of navigation, and taking into consideration current focus of US administration at China issue. We consider here that the case of Crimea is like a first step of possible aggressive actions of China. We see the case with Taiwan, we see the many familiarities between two cases, and we perfectly understand that China can openly refer to the case of Crimea in international relations as some kind of pattern and use these patterns. And we see this and we observe this. So there are some papers which investigate this. But I think that I can just give you a lot of nuances about this, but maybe you have some specific questions which you would like us to cover on this topic or Crimean platform operation, if you wish.
Well, we need to end now in 13 minutes. I actually, I'm fascinated by all this going on. And anybody can answer this. How active post the August meeting has the United States, NGOs, Parliament, diplomatic, been engaged in what is going on within the platform?
I will probably start, and I will start with the plans that we are working on right now, and that is one of the next year of the activities of the Crimea platform. So the point is that we want to design an action plan on the intergovernmental level for the next year up to the end of the year, where we can think of holding some ministerial meeting which will take stock of the first year of the Crimea platform. And we want to structure the activities of the Crimea platform around these tracks. And at each track, we would like to propose to partners to work on some particular projects which will address the key issues of these tracks and which will provide some dynamics and traction in the implementation of these projects. We are working also on our partners to find co-leaders of each of these tracks. So Ukraine and some other state or couple of states will be the co-leaders of these tracks, and they will be the promoters of the activities on these tracks. Next step, we would like to integrate the expert network activities to this intergovernmental level action plan, so that we, in full coordination of governments with experts, support each other, and we, in a coordinated way, provide some necessary analytical research, some expert diplomacy events at particular capitals abroad all over the world, to bring attention to the particular issues and problems of Crimea platform activities. And of course, we want also to integrate the third level of the interparliamentary level, and we are also thinking about holding some high-level event in the coming future. One of the immediate events that we are working on now is this annual security conference, which will take place in the beginning of the next year, and which will address this whole thing of militarization of Crimea and its implication on Ukraine, on the Black Sea states, on the wider Black Sea region, which encompasses Mediterranean, Balkans, Middle East, and also includes Arctic and Baltic as an arc of instability, as I have already outlined.
Thank you. Andrei, are there American NGOs involved in the NGO apparatus?
Not that we particularly work with. Alina probably can also describe from her side, but we are, again, our work is quite, it's quite broad, but it's narrow in the respect of what exactly we do. We do a research of some particular problematic points in terms of Crimea platform, but it's actually not about the platform. It's about studying the aspects of occupation, how it happened, what exactly is going on, and each of our research, which, as Alina already mentioned, we had first batch of 5, and now another batch of 5, so actually 6. So we're talking about at the end there is a specific recommendations for the government and the governments, and like for partner countries and so on. For instance, we have a specific recommendations for the partner countries about the Black Sea security and how to make sure that Black Sea doesn't turn into even a bigger problem than it is right now. How at least to stabilize it and how to prevent it from turning into a serious, like a battlefield. So those has recommendations, but it's not that we're working on this with some experts, some international experts, which are in Ukraine, but not at the moment with NGOs from US.
Well, from broader perspective, I can say that we just like an expert network, we just started to invite the international community, international experts to join. And as soon as this is some kind of non-formal institution, so it's still a flexible approach, and we just started. But at the same time, there are some specific topics among those researchers which Andrew mentioned. For example, sanctioning policy. One of our latest papers is dedicated to the analysis of the effectiveness of sanction policies. And one of the not very good trend which we describe there is so-called sanction pausing, which was caused by the US decision of about the Nord Stream 2. And that caused like some kind of wave of governmental and commercial decisions, which is now looks not very positive from the point of view of increasing the sanction presence. Yes, so we see more and more so-called imitation of the sanctioning when some kind of individuals are subject to sanctions. But for example, if we're saying about the Russian militaries who are like a high-level militaries who are sanctioned, but they before even had a prohibition of having some kind of property or living in the country or visiting the other countries. So this is some kind of formal punishment which doesn't influence somehow on the policy of Russia. And this is one of the issues which is also wrong from the perception, and we discover it in this paper in details that mostly Western countries consider that, for example, sanctions should change the behavior of Russia. No, they won't. I mean, this is not the tactic to change the behavior, but this is the tactic of the pressing back and to punish with the economic sanctions. And so we describe where you can put the sanctions to make Russia as much weaker as possible, which only way to stop it. And this is the specifically issues which would target US and European governments. But about the NGOs, this is just the beginning, and the first, probably the first quarter of the next year is the period when we want to have like a quite big network of international experts, including US. And that's, of course, very important for us.
Well, thank you. We are very much toward the end of our assigned time. I want to thank you. I want to go back and emphasize, I think, something I said at the beginning. Washington, and I hope I'm not overstating this, I don't think I am, Washington as a larger community, I mean, whether it's the think tanks and the government officials and congressional staffers and so forth, and news media, we all heard that there was a Crimean platform, that the meeting took place in August. There were some stories about who was going to head up the US delegation and so forth. But really, there's been virtually nothing since. And one of the reasons we wanted to have this panel today is to bring it back, both through the people that are watching and then the people, and we usually have a large number of people who come in and look at these programs on our website later, and start including certainly the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation, and try and include more people talking about it so that there will be more interest. More interest will bring more support, I would think, to your efforts and the efforts of those involved in the platform. I would make one other comment. You've touched on it, but here in Washington, I mean, I think you're going to have the official people focusing on these other matters that we discussed in the previous panel because of Russia's provoked aggression, what's going on now, right this minute. But one of the things that brings out a whole nother group of people into being active is the emphasis on the human rights violations that are taking place, certainly in Crimea and in the secret prisons in Donbass and so forth. So I raise that because the more people hear about that part of what you're looking into, I think there's a whole nother constituency here in the United States that can be aroused, if you will. We've got a couple of minutes if any one of you or each of you would like to make a final comment. Petro, you?
I would like just add that we are hoping for active participation of every government of the states that are members of Crimea platform, and of course the United States is a key partner in Crimea platform, and we hope that in coming months we will see a more active position of the United States government on that. And we would like to see active participation of experts and think tanks from United States in the activities of our expert network. And we really would like to see these projects of different analysis, preparations, and expert network, that they are truly international and they are composed of partnership with experts from different states, so that this Crimea platform activities would be visible all over the world, and we would see the importance of these projects for not only for Ukraine, but other regions and states. And to this end, I would like to also to highlight the existence of this fund, which is aimed at pumping resources to the expert network activities. It is really important since it plays, as Andrei and Alina has already mentioned, there are really huge amount of different topics that should be researched, and to this end we need these resources. Thank you.
With that, I need to stop because we're going to have to cut it off. I want to acknowledge, so that the two people that have written questions to you, I have recorded those questions. I will distribute them to you and ask if I'll give you email addresses so you can respond to those people. Sure. Nadia, you have something to say?
Well, yes, I just would like to say that please, let's think of this as a beginning of a conversation and a discussion. I think, Robert, you mentioned the idea about the Crimean platform raises the whole issue of human rights. But as Alina talked about, there are other aspects, the cultural aspect, I think environmental, which are also very important, but also because they also draw additional constituencies that care about that. So I think this is just the beginning, and we will be looking forward to continuing our discussions and to see what role the foundation can play, if only to publicize the research and the things that you are doing. So as I say, we could have talked longer, but I think this is a great beginning. So thank you.
With that, I thank you all. And I announce to our audience that the next panel with General Breedlove will start at 2:05 Washington time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Be in touch.
Thank you very much.